2,000 years ago, men in tunics and sandals mixed mud, ash, and crushed stone, and somehow built monuments that outlived empires. The Pantheon still stands, its vast dome untouched by time. The Colosseum, battered by earthquakes and war, refuses to fall. Their bridges still hold the weight of modern cars. Yet the skyscrapers we build today, with all our machines, formulas, and science, crumble within a century. How did they do it? How did the Romans create concrete that does not die? In the heart of Rome, under the echo of church bells and traffic, ancient walls still breathe. You can see it in the cracks, not empty fractures, but scars that have healed. Rain seeps in, lime reacts, and the concrete repairs itself, as if alive. The ancients had no laboratories, no chemistry, no machines, only observation, repetition, and faith in the perfection of nature's design. While we chase progress, they achieved permanence. Their secret is buried not in mystery, but in their humility before the earth. Imagine walking through Rome in the age of Augustus, the air thick with dust, the ring of hammers against stone, thousands of laborers sweating under the sun. In every direction, something was being built. Aqueducts that carried water across mountains, amphitheaters that roared with life, harbors that defied the sea. The empire's strength wasn't just its armies, it was its concrete. To the Romans, every wall was a declaration of eternity. They called their capital Urbs Aeterna, the eternal city. And they built it to prove the name true. Modern engineers study these ruins in disbelief. How does concrete submerged in seawater for millennia remain unbroken, while ours decays in decades? The answer lies in a forgotten art, a recipe that blended volcanic ash, lime, and seawater into a living substance that grew stronger, not weaker, with time. To the Roman builder, this was not just material. It was alchemy. They were crafting stone from fire and earth, commanding nature to obey their will. But the secret was never written as a formula. It was passed through generations of craftsmen who learned by touch, by smell, by instinct. When the mixture hissed as lime met water, they knew it was alive. When the paste steamed in the sun, they whispered prayers to Vulcan, the god of fire, believing he blessed their labor. Their construction sites were not just engineering marvels, they were sacred rituals where science, religion, and empire merged into one act of creation. Each structure was a promise that Rome would endure beyond the life of any man. Even now, centuries after the empire fell, the Pantheon's dome remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Its oculus, the eye of heaven, still casts the same beam of light across marble floors as it did in 125 AD. The concrete beneath it holds firm, its molecular bonds stronger today than when Hadrian's architects poured it. This was more than building. It was defiance of time. The Romans conquered nations with legions, but they conquered eternity with lime and ash. Their monuments have watched plagues, empires, and revolutions rise and fall, yet they remain. Beneath the dust of their ruins lies a truth our modern world has forgotten. The ancients didn't build fast. They built forever. And so, the story begins, not with glory or gold, but with the humble hands of men mixing earth and fire, unknowingly crafting a miracle that would outlast history itself. They were not magicians. They were engineers, craftsmen, and soldiers, the quiet architects of eternity. Across the empire's vast expanse, from the misty frontiers of Britannia to the golden deserts of Syria, Rome's builders carried a single ambition: to leave behind something that could not die. Every empire wanted power. Rome wanted permanence. The Roman legions were more than warriors. They were builders in armor. When they conquered a new province, they didn't just plant banners, they laid foundations. Roads carved through forests, bridges arched over rivers, forts rose from barren plains. Wherever Rome marched, civilization followed. Behind the shields came surveyors, engineers, masons, an army of creators armed not with swords, but with tools. The sound of hammers was as vital to conquest as the clash of steel. At the center of this architectural machine stood the Fabbri, Rome's construction specialists. They knew the terrain, the stone, and the weather. They could build in swamp or sand, under siege or sun. Their loyalty was to precision. A single miscalculation could bring down a wall meant to last forever. Yet their knowledge was rarely written, passed instead through apprenticeship and repetition, a sacred chain of skill linking one generation to the next. Concrete, or opus cementitium, was their secret weapon. While other civilizations relied on cut stone, Rome's builders poured the earth itself into molds, shaping mountains as if by will. This new material changed everything. It was faster, stronger, and adaptable. It freed them from the limits of the quarry. Temples could rise on soft soil, harbors could defy the sea, and cities could bloom overnight. The empire's expansion was not just military, it was architectural conquest. Consider the aqueducts, arteries of civilization carrying life itself. Made of concrete and stone, some stretched for 60 miles, crossing valleys and mountains to deliver water to cities of 1 million souls. The engineers of Rome did not just construct, they calculated the future. They built with such precision that some aqueducts still flow today, their channels carved by hands now dust. But the Roman obsession with building was not born from vanity alone. To build was to assert divine order. Architecture was faith made visible, a way to impose Roman harmony upon a chaotic world. "Where we build," said Vitruvius, the empire's great architect, "we bring civilization." Each column, arch, and vault was a prayer to permanence, a statement that even gods would admire. The emperor's will flowed through mortar. Augustus famously boasted, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble." But marble was only a skin. Beneath it beat the heart of concrete. Every forum, temple, and bathhouse hid its true skeleton beneath the white veneer. It was the anonymous material, the unglamorous foundation, that truly built the empire. In this invisible miracle lay the Romans' greatest paradox. Their monuments were designed not for spectacle, but for survival. Concrete was not beautiful. It was eternal. It could be poured by the hands of slaves or soldiers, yet it carried the ambition of gods. Rome's emperors dreamed of immortality. Its builders quietly gave it to them. From the roaring Colosseum to the whispering aqueducts of Provence, every surviving Roman structure tells the same story. Human ambition bound to the laws of nature, not against them. And through this harmony, they achieved what no empire before or since has managed, to turn dust into eternity. The miracle began with fire. In the hills outside Rome, lime burners tended roaring kilns day and night, feeding them with wood until the air shimmered with heat. They threw limestone into the flames, white blocks hissing and cracking as they transformed into something new. From rock was born quicklime, the foundation of Rome's eternal concrete. When the lime was slaked with water, it came alive, boiling, steaming, spitting. To the builders, this was the earth's breath, a sacred transformation. To modern science, it was chemistry, but to the Romans, it was creation. Imagine the scene. Smoke curling into the Italian sky, men blackened with soot, their tunics stiff with dust. The lime was dangerous, caustic, and alive. Touch it too soon, and it burned your skin. Mix it too fast, and it erupted like a living creature. Every craftsman knew the rhythm. The hiss meant the reaction was right. They didn't use thermometers or scales. They judged by sight, smell, and instinct. For them, the material wasn't just a tool. It was an element of nature they had learned to tame. Into this living lime, they added volcanic ash, the gray dust that fell like rain from Mount Vesuvius and the Bay of Naples. The Romans called it pozzolana, after the region of Pozzuoli, where the ash was harvested by the ton. It was unlike any other substance on Earth. Mixed with lime and water, it created a chemical marriage so perfect that, once hardened, it could resist time, fire, and even the sea. The ash gave the concrete its soul, the power to endure. This was the heart of Roman alchemy, turning destruction into creation. The same volcanic fury that had buried Pompeii gave them the material to build eternity. The Romans had witnessed mountains explode, watched fire consume cities, and instead of fearing nature's rage, they learned from it. They harnessed it. They found strength in ash. The mixture was simple, but precise. Lime for binding, pozzolana for magic, and crushed stone or brick for body. Water, often seawater, was the catalyst. When these came together, a slow, silent reaction began. New crystals formed, growing like veins through the concrete, binding it tighter each year. The material didn't set. It lived. It evolved. Long after the builders died, their walls continued to strengthen. Picture a Roman harbor under construction. Waves crash against wooden scaffolds. Slaves pour buckets of wet mixture into molds beneath the sea. The concrete sinks, sets, and hardens, not despite the salt water, but because of it. No other civilization could do this. Even now, those same harbor walls, 2 millennia old, stand unbroken beneath the Mediterranean. Modern divers marvel at them, rough, pitted, but intact. To the Romans, this mastery of elements was divine. Fire turned stone to powder. Water turned powder to rock. Earth and air gave it form. They believed the gods had blessed them with nature's blueprint, and in return, they built temples, baths, and amphitheaters that honored those powers. Their world was one of balance, of learning to work with nature, not against it. Modern engineers, with all our formulas and machinery, still chase their perfection. The Romans, without understanding molecules, understood matter. They discovered that the greatest strength lies not in hardness, but in harmony. That the earth, when treated with reverence, gives back eternity. From dust and flame, they crafted a miracle, one that defied decay, outlasted kingdoms, and whispered the truth that science has only now begun to rediscover. The secret to immortality was hidden in the fire all along. Deep in the volcanic heart of Italy, where the earth still breathes fire beneath its skin, lies the secret ingredient of eternity, pozzolana. To most, it was nothing but ash, the gray dust that drifted across fields after eruptions, choking the air and coating everything it touched. But to the Romans, it was a gift from the gods, a divine powder that could turn water into stone. They mined it by the cartload, from the shores of the Bay of Naples to the slopes of Vesuvius. And with it, they built a world that would not crumble. Pozzolana was unlike any other earth on the planet. When mixed with lime, it didn't simply harden, it transformed, it fused. It created microscopic crystals that grew and multiplied over centuries, locking the concrete into an ever-strengthening mass. To modern scientists, these minerals, tobermorite and stratlingite, are the keys to Roman concrete's immortality. To the Romans themselves, they were miracles made tangible. They didn't know the chemistry, they only knew the result, walls that grew harder the older they became. But not all pozzolana was created equal. The Romans soon discovered that the ash from certain regions worked better than others. The finest came from Campania, where Vesuvius had laid waste to the land centuries before. Builders would travel great distances to gather it, filling ships that sailed north to Rome and east across the Mediterranean. It became a commodity more valuable than gold, traded by engineers and architects who knew its worth. Without pozzolana, there would have been no Colosseum, no aqueducts, no harbors that defied the sea. One of the most astonishing examples of its power still lies beneath the waves, the Roman harbor of Cosa. Built in the 2nd century BCE, its breakwaters were poured directly into seawater using pozzolana-based concrete. Modern divers have examined its walls, expecting erosion and decay. What they found instead was shocking. The concrete was stronger than when it was first made. The seawater had not destroyed it. It had fed it. The salt triggered reactions inside the mixture, growing new crystals that reinforced the structure year after year. Think about that. The Romans built harbors that healed themselves. Every wave that struck them made them stronger. Every crack that formed gave birth to new stone. They had unknowingly created one of the world's first self-healing materials, a concept modern science only began to understand 2,000 years later. And the genius was not in their formulas, but in their faith. They believed in observation, and the lessons nature offered freely. They watched the way lava cooled, how ash settled into rock, how time shaped the earth's wounds into strength. Their engineers were not theorists, they were listeners. They read the earth like scripture. They learned that the secret to longevity was not resistance, but adaptation. In the shadow of Vesuvius, they built with reverence. They knew that to take from the volcano was to borrow its power. The gods of fire were not to be challenged, but harnessed, their wrath transmuted into endurance. For every eruption that destroyed, the Romans built anew, using the same ashes that once buried cities to raise temples, roads, and homes that would stand for eternity. Even today, the ruins of Pompeii and Herculaneum bear silent witness to that cycle of death and rebirth. Out of volcanic ruin came the empire's greatest strength, and within every surviving Roman wall, every aqueduct that still crosses the countryside, lies the breath of that same volcano, still alive, still binding, still whispering the secret of the earth. In pozzolana, the Romans found more than a building material. They found immortality, a union between destruction and creation so perfect that even time itself could not undo it. It begins with a crack, a tiny fracture invisible to the naked eye. In modern concrete, that's the start of decay. Water seeps in, corrosion begins, and slowly, the structure dies from within. But in Roman concrete, that crack was not the beginning of the end. It was the start of renewal. Rainwater would trickle through, awakening the sleeping lime buried deep inside the mix. When the water met those untouched lime clasts, a chemical miracle occurred. They reactivated, reacting with the surrounding minerals to form new crystals, sealing the crack shut forever. The wall healed itself. For centuries, no one understood why Roman ruins refused to crumble. When modern engineers examined them, they found a strange inconsistency. White flecks scattered throughout the ancient mix. At first, scientists thought it was carelessness, evidence of poor mixing. But under the microscope, those white specks told another story. They were lime fragments, intentionally left unmixed. It wasn't imperfection. It was design. The Romans had discovered, through trial and observation, that leaving chunks of unreacted lime inside the mixture allowed their buildings to regenerate. When moisture entered the cracks, those lime nodules dissolved slowly, producing calcium that reacted with the surrounding pozzolana. The result was new minerals, binding the fracture shut. The structure didn't weaken. It evolved. Each storm, each crack, each century made it stronger. Modern science now calls it autogenous healing, but to the Romans, it was simply nature doing what it always had, mending itself. Their concrete wasn't static, it was alive. The same forces that erode most materials, water, air, and time, became part of its survival. It was the perfect paradox. Fragility transformed into permanence. Imagine the Pantheon during a heavy Roman rain. Water cascades through the oculus, pounding the marble floor. Beneath the surface, unseen and silent, the ancient concrete breathes. Minute fractures close as rain seeps into them, reacting with lime that has lain dormant for millennia. The building, 2,000 years old, still repairs itself with every storm that touches it. This living material was the embodiment of Roman philosophy, resilience through adaptation. They didn't try to conquer nature, they worked with it. They understood that nothing could truly resist time, but something could grow with it. Their genius lay not in defiance, but in harmony. The same balance they sought in politics, law, and religion they achieved in stone and mortar. Modern engineers look upon their work with envy. Our concrete, made with precision and technology, begins to fail after a few decades. We reinforce it with steel, coat it with chemicals, pour it with machines, yet it cracks, crumbles, and corrodes. The Romans, with nothing but ash, lime, and seawater, created something that gets stronger every year. It wasn't luck. It was wisdom born of patience. They didn't rush construction. A wall could take months to mix, dry, and settle. Each layer was allowed to breathe before the next was added. Builders studied color and texture like doctors diagnosing a pulse. They trusted the earth, not the clock. In an empire that demanded immortality, they learned that the only way to defeat time was to work in rhythm with it. This was not concrete. It was philosophy made solid, a lesson in endurance that echoes through centuries of ruin and rubble. The Romans proved that strength is not the absence of weakness, but the ability to heal. And in their hands, even stone learned to live. Rome was not only an empire of swords and legions, it was an empire of builders. Concrete was its unspoken power, its invisible weapon, the quiet force that turned ambition into permanence. Every emperor sought to leave his mark upon eternity, and concrete was the means by which they carved their names into the bones of the earth. When marble gleamed and gold shimmered, it was concrete beneath that held the world together, the hidden muscle of the empire. Walk through the Forum on a quiet morning. The ruins seem still, but they are not dead. The stones hum with the echoes of chisels and shouts, the rhythm of thousands of hands shaping the will of Rome. The same material that built bathhouses and basilicas also built bridges, sewers, and aqueducts, the arteries through which civilization flowed. To the Romans, architecture was not vanity, it was order. Every structure reflected the hierarchy of their world, the emperor at the top, the gods above him, and the people held together beneath arches of unyielding stone. Concrete allowed Rome to dream bigger than any civilization before it. It gave shape to impossible visions, like the Pantheon, whose dome still defies logic. It stands without steel, without reinforcement, a perfect hemisphere poured from volcanic ash and lime. When Hadrian ordered its construction, it wasn't just a temple. It was a challenge to the heavens. "We can build the sky itself," he might have said. And they did. But Rome's concrete was not limited to grandeur. It flowed into the streets, the aqueducts, the docks, the unseen veins of empire. In Britain, in Spain, in North Africa, Roman engineers carried their recipes and their rituals. They mixed pozzolana and lime beside deserts and tundras alike. A fort in Germania, a villa in Gaul, a bathhouse in Antioch, all bound by the same gray pulse of Roman ambition. When you travel across Europe today, every ruined wall still murmurs the same phrase, Roma fuit. Rome was here. For the Romans, to build was a sacred act. Vitruvius, the empire's great architectural philosopher, wrote that a building must have three virtues, firmitas, utilitas, and venustas, strength, utility, and beauty. But Roman concrete went beyond those ideals. It was endurance made manifest, immortalitas. Their structures were not mere shelters or monuments. They were declarations of divine permanence. Every dome and arch was an echo of their faith in control over nature, over time, over death itself. The empire's rulers understood this. Each emperor built to outlast the last. Augustus rebuilt the city in marble. Trajan carved his forum into the hill. Hadrian raised the Pantheon to rival the gods. Even in decay, these monuments served their purpose, to remind every generation that Rome was eternal. The very phrase Roma Eterna became prophecy, written not in ink, but in stone. The paradox was beautiful and tragic. While the empire itself would one day fall, its buildings would not. The people who mixed the concrete, who burned the lime, who carried the stone, their names were forgotten, but their work endured. The emperors are gone, the slaves are dust, the legions long silent, yet their walls still stand beneath the Italian sun. Rome's true empire was never its borders. It was its endurance. Its genius lay not in conquest, but in construction, the ability to make the ephemeral eternal. And though centuries would bring fire, war, and ruin, the bones of Rome would not break. Beneath every layer of history, the gray heart of concrete still beats, whispering the same defiant truth. We are still here. When Rome fell, it was not just an empire that collapsed, it was an entire memory. The recipe for eternity, once passed from craftsman to apprentice by word and touch, vanished into the smoke of burning libraries and the silence of abandoned cities. The world that had once built mountains from ash and fire forgot how to mix even a wall that would last a century. What had been common knowledge among Roman builders became legend whispered in the ruins. In the centuries that followed, medieval masons stared in awe at the shattered remains of aqueducts and temples, wondering how men from another age had moved mountains and made stone that refused to die. They could carve cathedrals from limestone, raise spires toward heaven, yet they could not replicate the humble gray mortar that held Roman walls for 2,000 years. Their bricks crumbled, their fortresses cracked, while Roman harbors, half buried in the sea, remained unbroken. The Middle Ages were filled with myths about Rome's lost art. Some said the concrete had been blessed by pagan gods. Others believed the mixture contained human blood, the souls of slaves, or secret herbs gathered under moonlight. Builders sought to imitate it, but their lime was weak, their ash impure. They lacked the volcanic soul, the pozzolana that only Italy's fire-born earth could give. By the time Europe built again, it had forgotten that nature itself had once been the Romans' ally. During the Renaissance, curiosity returned. Artists and scholars looked again upon the Pantheon and asked, how? They measured its dome, studied its proportions, copied its curves, but none understood the living science hidden beneath the marble skin. Even Michelangelo, when designing St. Peter's Basilica, studied the Pantheon with reverence but never cracked its secret. He imitated its shape, not its substance. Humanity had inherited Rome's beauty but lost its wisdom. Centuries turned, and with them came arrogance. The modern world prided itself on progress, on science, on formulas and precision. We built towers of glass and concrete, poured by machines and reinforced by steel. We called it advancement. And yet, within a few decades, cracks appeared. Bridges failed. Buildings collapsed. Our monuments demanded repair while Rome's ruins, born in an age of torches and hammers, endured storms, quakes, and time itself. What had been forgotten was not just a formula, but a philosophy. The Romans built slowly, deliberately, reverently. They understood that permanence required patience. Modern builders sought speed, efficiency, and profit, and in their haste, they lost the art of listening to the materials themselves. The lime, the ash, the stone. They were alive once, but we made them dead. By the 19th century, Rome's concrete was a mystery buried under its own success. Engineers marveled at its endurance, but dismissed it as primitive. They invented Portland cement, a fast-curing substitute, cheap, strong, but soulless. It built cities overnight and doomed them to crumble within a lifetime. The ancient wisdom, once whispered in the rhythm of mixing, was gone. Yet the ruins endured, mocking our pride. The Pantheon still stood while our modern marvels rusted and fell. Rome had built without knowing chemistry, and yet it had mastered it. We, with our laboratories and science, built without soul, and it showed. It would take 2 millennia, countless collapses, and the humility to look backward before humanity dared to ask again. What did the ancients know that we have forgotten? Only then did we begin to rediscover that the answer was never magic. It was patience, observation, and respect for the earth itself. The Romans had listened to the whispers of ash and lime. We had silenced them, but the ruins were waiting, patient as stone, ready to speak again. It began, as all rediscoveries do, with curiosity, the kind that refuses to let silence stay silent. In laboratories from Rome to Boston, scientists began to look again at the ancient walls, not as relics, but as living records. They chipped small samples from aqueducts, harbors, and temples that had stood for 20 centuries, placing fragments of eternity beneath electron microscopes. And what they saw defied everything they thought they knew about concrete. Inside those dusty gray pieces were structures that seemed almost biological, veins, crystals, and networks that grew with age. The lime clasts, those mysterious white flecks once dismissed as flaws, revealed their secret. They were reservoirs of potential, lying dormant for centuries, ready to awaken when water touched them. It was as if the Romans had built self-regeneration into the bones of their cities. Concrete that healed itself, a concept so advanced that even modern engineering had not yet mastered it. Researchers found that when water entered cracks in Roman concrete, the reaction reignited. Lime dissolved, minerals recrystallized, and the fracture closed. This was not static matter. It was dynamic, alive in its chemistry, patient in its purpose. Rome's builders, through experience and faith, had created a material that outlived them, outlasted their empire, and even outsmarted time. The world began to take notice. Universities published studies proving what archaeologists had long suspected. The Romans didn't simply mix lime and ash. They engineered harmony. The combination of pozzolana, lime, and seawater created minerals that modern science could barely reproduce. And now, armed with this knowledge, engineers began to experiment. They recreated the ancient formula, adjusting heat, moisture, and ash. The results were stunning. The new mixtures lasted longer, resisted cracking, and, like their ancient ancestors, began to heal themselves. The implications were enormous. In an age where modern concrete contributes nearly 8% of global carbon emissions and lasts only a few decades, Roman concrete offered an alternative. Sustainable, enduring, almost eternal. The past had returned. not as nostalgia, but as salvation. From the ruins of antiquity came a vision of the future. Cities built to last not for lifetimes, but for civilizations. Yet there was something deeper than science at play, something spiritual. The Romans had understood a truth that modernity forgot. Permanence is not achieved through domination, but through cooperation. They did not force nature into submission, they partnered with it. They took fire and ash, destruction itself, and turned it into creation. In doing so, they mirrored life. Growth through decay, rebirth through ruin. Today, engineers study the Pantheon not as a monument, but as a message. Beneath its dome, where sunlight still streams through the oculus, we can feel what the Romans knew instinctively, that human achievement is most powerful when it listens to the wisdom of the earth. The same volcanic ash that once buried Pompeii gave birth to a building that has never fallen. From death came endurance. From ruin came revelation. So perhaps the true legacy of Roman concrete is not its strength, but its lesson. It teaches us that time is not the enemy. It is the collaborator. That endurance is not found in resisting change, but in embracing it. And that the greatest civilizations are not those that build the tallest towers, but those that build with the deepest understanding of nature. 2,000 years later, the Pantheon still stands, not as a ruin, but as a teacher. Its dome still breathes, its walls still live, its secret still whispers. If you wish to last forever, learn first to build with the earth, not against it.